Welcome to our inaugural first episode of Nerdy Jock Media Presents. Anime Podcast presents Dragon Ball Z Megapod.
What's up? Happy New Year, man.
Happy New Year, Happy New Year. My name is Kevin Ketcham. I'll be one of your hosts here, as well as my friend DK, who also does have a power level over 9,000 from what I hear.
I do. I have a power level over 9,000!
This is our first ever pod, so we're going to do plenty of these, and hopefully we're going to get better as we go along. But just thank you for tuning in now. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like, subscribe, tell us what you think in the comments, what we can work on, and how we can make this pod better for you guys. If you're listening to a podcast as well, follow us on all of our socials. It is at nerdyjock_media on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, you name it, or X, whatever it's called now, right?
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, it's as of January 2024, it's X. If it's something else in the future, sorry.
So basically, and yeah, all of our social medias, follow us there. So basically, I wanted to make this media network, bring in all my various interests in one space for fun, basically. I've been an anime fan since I was probably 8 or 10 years old, and that actually came from finding Dragon Ball, which is really, really cool. I'm also an athlete. I love to play sports. I love to weight train, lift weights, which is actually something that I did also get from Dragon Ball. Yeah.
A lot of people inspired to work out, take up martial arts, improve their lives, all of that from Dragon Ball. There are so many stories.
Yeah, so for me, I was like, wait, it's one of my favorite, motivational tools is, Dragon Ball. I mean, I remember when the internet was still up and coming. I mean, tells our age here, but
yeah.
I would watch YouTube, videos on YouTube or whatever when they first came out,
right,
20 years ago, like music videos.
Well, you said already too, you were an athlete and you were into anime, and this is in the 90s. That must have been really hard. That's like a double life right there.
That was tough, man. I mean,
it's a little bit more acceptable now. And in the 90s, I remember, you couldn't tell people you liked anime. It would be like saying, "Oh, I like porn." Yeah. People would be like, "What? Like, what is that? Dragon Balls?"
Yeah.
You get so much crap. I mean, it was not easily accessible. It was on syndication, on networks like UPN, WB, and sometimes at 5:30 in the morning. So it was not something that people were aware of. This was way before Toonami existed. So if you were into it, you were really into it. You were waking up at 5:30 to tape the episodes. And if you wanted to be cool, you could not tell anybody that you were into it.
Yeah, and what you were just mentioning is actually even before the internet era. Well, like, internet is where you could load one screen at a time, and it would slowly, if it was a JPEG or a picture, it would slowly load and take maybe a couple of minutes just to load one page. So,
totally. We're totally dating ourselves, too. We're like the old men, like, back in my day, the dial-up internet, you could load one page at a minute.
One page a day, and you'd be happy with that, and that's where the internet was.
I remember when DSL first came out, and it took 10 seconds to load a page, and I was like, this is the future.
Right.
It's crazy.
Well, it's just kind of crazy because, Dragon Ball was one of these pop culture moments and series that was really caught in between, in America at least, in between the Japan era before it was even in America, to where people heard about it, but unless you were at a specialty store in LA or maybe 1 or 3 or 4 other over the country, you would not even have access to even know what a Super Saiyan was or Goku, anything like that.
Right. I mean, meanwhile, Latin America had gotten the entire thing. I mean, because GT wrapped up in 95.
Right.
And around 95 was when Dragon Ball hit the United States. And I believe that maybe a little while before, Canada had a separate dub called the Golden Harmony dub, where they did the entire series. Goku had a different name. His name was Zero. Korin was called Whiskers the Wonder Cat. That's a whole... We're going to get into, eventually on this pod, all the disparate and crazy dubs of Dragon Ball. But in North America, while the rest of the world had it, we didn't have it. We got it very, very late. And we were getting it in really, really tiny chunks, too.
Yeah, I mean, what was your experience actually like when you were first introduced to Dragon Ball?
I was introduced to it mainly through playing cards that my stepbrother had. He had these cards. I found the designs really interesting, and then I found it. It was on syndication, I think on WB, Sundays at 10 o'clock. And the first episode I watched was, I assume that the people watching this have already seen Dragon Ball, so
right.
Spoilers
good.
Spoilers
alert coming,
yeah,
by the way.
Very first episode I saw, Chaozu blows himself up to try to kill Nappa, fails, and then Tien or Ten Shinhan, depending on your persuasion, fires all of his energy into a tri-beam or Kikoho and tries to kill Nappa. It doesn't work and then falls down dead. And that was my introduction to the show. And I was like, what the hell is this? Because there were no other shows accessible in the 90s that had that level of stakes.
It was awesome. Mine's very similar to yours, actually.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was hanging with my buddies. We were kids, like literally 10 years old, I think, 10 or 11, something like that. Right in that Power Ranger era, too. Big fan of that as well. But we were watching Saturday morning cartoons. That's what it was. And I think it was the Ocean dub, the Pioneer version, the first series where they really only had access to, I think it was the first 26 episodes or something like that.
Yeah, it was, oh God. I mean, I can get into when the Funimation Ocean Pioneer or Saban, whatever, that original dub came out, they would run through the entire thing, add one episode, and then start it all over again. And so you would have to wait weeks or months just to find out what the next thing was. And then at a certain point, they just stopped. It's like Goku shows up at Namek. Vegeta's like, is Kakarot a Super Saiyan? And then nothing for years.
Crickets for years.
For years.
But not to backtrack, but to backtrack.
Yeah,
here.
sorry.
You were
telling a story.
Hey,
yeah.
You're all about tangents here. We will go off on the road on Snake Way. We will do whatever we have to do. Come back and start over again.
Okay,
have to. So
yeah. Go off.
Don't worry about that. Yeah, go on and tell your stories. But so we started watching Dragon Ball. Like, dude, this is kind of cool. You know, like as an action movie or action show. It's like, you know, this guy named Goku and this guy named Piccolo, who, by the way, we didn't have Dragon Ball back then either, by the way.
Right, yeah.
So Dragon Ball Z was actually the first introduction I think most people had. And then eventually, years later with Funimation, they bought back the rights to Dragon Ball, and then they started releasing that. So no one really had a clear introduction to what it was. But I think one of the first or second episodes I saw was when Goku got killed by Piccolo, who's holding Raditz back. He gets killed, and you're like, whoa, what the hell? I think this Goku guy is the lead character in the show.
Yeah.
And he just died? And this is like the fourth or fifth episode of the show?
In the Ocean dub, it was like episode 2 or something. So it was like you get introduced, you're like, here's the hero, here's his rival, they're going to team up because there's a guy who's way stronger than them, and then episode 2, Goku's dead.
Done.
Yeah.
And I was like, dude, I looked at my buddy, I was like, this is crazy. This is awesome. And number one, a side note is, you know, in anime, they have serialized shows.
Right.
Where cartoons in America at that point, you know, doesn't matter what it was, besides X-Men, but that was around the same era, but a little bit later.
Saturday morning cartoons and Power Rangers had a serial component to them, but they were also still largely kind of monster of the week. Right,
exactly. And this is the first show I saw where it's like, okay, we need to, you know, just like a soap opera, you need to watch every episode to stay up on the details. First serialized show I saw that was animated. And that was really interesting to me. In a way, I was like, oh, this is awesome.
And if you missed that new episode, every time they re-looped it and they added a new episode, you had to wait weeks or months to see what happened. Because they would just start it over again because they didn't have enough. The whole history of it is crazy. So just a little rundown on it really quick. In the 90s, for some reason, a lot of voiceover work went to Canada, went to Vancouver. A man named Gen Fukunaga got the rights to Dragon Ball Z in Texas because he wanted to bring it to the United States because, again, it was super late. It was the 90s. Why didn't we have it yet? But the producers would fly to Vancouver to the Ocean Group to dub it, bring it back, and then it was on syndication or whatever. But that all changed when Toonami happened on Cartoon Network because it was now an after-school show. It was prime time. Kids discovered it. They loved it. And they're like, oh, we need new episodes. And they didn't have time to go back and forth to Canada. So they hired a brand new cast to try to voice match the Canadian cast so they could just pump out as many episodes as they could. And man, the Funimation cast, like in the early days, they really went through the ringer. I mean, they were working like 5 days a week. I think like 8 to 12 hours just screaming their lungs out because it had to get on TV. Like the turnaround was crazy. It was like 99 or 98, 99. Yeah, because I remember I got a tape from Costco because I saw there was a tape that had Captain Ginyu and Goku's Dogi with Gohan holding on to him like riding Nimbus. And I was like, oh, new episodes. And I put it on. And I think a lot of people who had it in syndication, my first reaction was like, wait, what the hell is this? Like,
Yeah.
the voices are all different. The music is different. Like, what is this? Like, it was crazy. And then eventually with Toonami, it just became the norm when the Funimation cast just kind of made it their own. They did their own voices. They stopped trying to imitate Ocean, and then it just, it became theirs.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess that's a pretty good breakdown of the origins,
The origins, yeah.
the origins and introductions to what made us super huge fans. And speaking of Dragon Ball, just in general, like what's your favorite arcs? What's your favorite series?
I reread the Saiyan and Namek arcs once a year.
Okay.
I have them in the full color releases that Viz localized. I guess in Japan, Shueisha did a full color release of the entire series. And that's not to say I don't like the original monochrome. I love the monochrome look of manga, but the full color production on Dragon Ball, it's just so beautiful. And I feel like the quintessential arcs, like the 3 best arcs in all of Dragon Ball, are the Tenkaichi Budokai when Goku fights Piccolo.
That's great.
Which immediately is followed by the Saiyan arc, which is immediately followed by Namek and Frieza. And those to me are like 3 of my favorite arcs all time manga anime. I just love those. The stakes, the character. It's just unbelievably good.
Yeah, I agree. I think the Saiyan saga is probably one of my favorites. Saiyan, the Vegeta saga, and then the Frieza saga as well. Because that took a long time because everyone who loves Dragon Ball Z knows, the first time Goku goes Super Saiyan,
Right.
And that's just like a historical moment, not even just in anime, but in pop culture in general.
Yeah.
I mean, like, what?
Because
Sonic the Hedgehog?
we had shirts in the 90s that showed Super Saiyan Goku.
And no one knew what the hell that was.
Yeah, and then
we were like, what is this deal? Is this Goku? What's going on here?
And then as the internet started becoming more ubiquitous, you would see content from people who had Japanese sources or Latin American sources. I remember I saw Vegito versus Boo dubbed in Spanish because it's like that's what you could get in just random corners of the internet, like Netscape Navigator, GeoCities websites, and all that crazy stuff. But there were shirts, and there was like video games too. Like there's a game on PlayStation called Dragon Ball Z Final Bout that showed everybody Super Saiyan, and it was like, oh, when do we get here? But for us, syndication, Vegeta would just go Kakarot's Super Saiyan, and then it would just set over again.
Right.
And it would like, oh man, when are we gonna get that golden hair?
It felt like. I mean, I was a kid, so it felt like a century. It felt like a decade before we actually got to see him go Super Saiyan in English for the first time. I mean, I remember just trying to get a hold of any kind of material that I could see. There's a store from Memphis, shout out Memphis, and there's a store called Animax, where it's the only one in the city of Memphis that, had anime, sold anime, stuff like that. But they didn't have the tapes, but they did have manga.
Oh, okay.
So I would just bulk buy as much Dragon Ball manga as I could, and it was all in Japanese. I didn't have the English version.
Oh, wow.
It was legit just Japanese. That's all they had. And I would just look through the pages like, oh man, this is crazy. I had no idea what was going on. Because I couldn't read Japanese, but I could kind of like picture stuff together. I'm like, oh man, this looks cool.
Well, one of the amazing things about Toriyama as a storyteller, and other manga artists have said this about him, is that the way that he panels, you can glean 40 to 60% of the story just by how the panels move together.
Right.
So I was in the same boat. I had I had some Japanese manga that my neighbors had, and I would look through and be like, what is happening here? Like Frieza stuff. I mean, I was like, why does Frieza look different? Because we only had the first form with the horns, and like he's got this smooth chrome head all of a sudden. It's like, wait, what's going on? How does this happen? But yeah, you're right. It did feel like centuries before we finally got any kind of indicate, okay, this is how it happens, this is why, all of that stuff.
It felt like forever, but when we finally got it, it was worth the wait. I mean, that was kind of my like, oh, this is awesome. So I think the Frieza, Vegeta, Saiyan, Frieza saga was great. I mean, I didn't like how Namek was all green all the time. Like sometimes...
The way it was rendered in the anime?
Yeah, like sometimes I got tired of seeing the same. I mean, obviously, Toriyama's notorious for having sets that are mainly just, outside, mountains, stuff like that.
Vast landscapes that are never ending. Yeah.
Never ending, so they don't have to draw, city life and stuff like that. We really only get in that in the Cell Saga, honestly, for the most part. But Namek, I did get tired of seeing those lollipop trees.
Yeah, those blue, circular trees. Very kind kind of the same landscape. Yeah, I could see that. What I loved about that though was like the tension of like there's a guy that Vegeta is scared of. So Vegeta's being kind of like a secret agent trying to steal the Dragon Balls both from the Namekians and from Frieza. Right. And we know that the Earthlings are completely outgunned. Like Krill and Gohan, they don't stand a chance against Vegeta, much less everybody else. So all those moments when they rescue Dende and Dodoria's chasing them, it was just like, I mean, literally just like sitting forward, like, oh my gosh, like what's going to happen? Because Vegeta's scared of this guy. So what does that mean for these guys who can't even stand up to Vegeta?
Yeah. I mean, tensions were high. I mean,
yeah,
it was a great arc as well. I mean, definitely one of my favorites here. I do have a quick question. We're already talking about the Namek saga, Saiyan saga with Vegeta. Now, I'm going back. I'm reading the manga, rereading the manga, as well as watching the episodes, the 291 version. So the full cut on Crunchyroll, by the way. I think you can get it on if you want to check it out and just kind of catch up with us as we go along later on in the series. You can definitely check it out. I know on Crunchyroll for sure, because Funimation was bought by
Crunchyroll, which was bought by Sony, and then they're discontinuing Funimation at some point. The app is still there, but it will be gone someday.
So that's the best place to get it. That's easily available, and I prefer the sub as well. Not to go on a side tangent here, but I definitely prefer. I like the dubs too.
We're gonna polarize the fans immediately because there are people who are like. Guy. I mean, this is what happens when you dole something out so slowly. Is that like you have people tend to prefer what they saw first. So I always, for me, like have a very soft spot for the Ocean dub because I mean, but especially if I can just gush about them really quick, like particularly Scott McNeil and Brian Drummond's performances as Piccolo and Vegeta, like they would do these metal screams when they would scream, like, and you know that they would fuck their voices up. Like it was bad, but they really committed. And the second Goku that Ocean casted, Peter Kalamis, I think is the closest to Masako Nozawa, the original Japanese Goku, as we ever got in English, and would just do these crazy like Kaioken and like just long screams. I mean, it was just amazing stuff. But again, going back, people typically prefer what they are used to and what they saw first. So there's a lot of fighting in the community about like Falconer score versus Kikuchi score, Ocean versus Funny. Like nobody likes Masako Nozawa's voice. Like I talk to everyone's like, yeah, it's the only one I'll watch dub, but I love her voice. Yeah. Especially if you go from Dragon Ball to Dragon Ball Z, it is a deeper voice.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a fan of all the subs myself, but so here, okay, we're gonna go right back here before we go even further into the Cell saga and Buu saga. Now, I'm rewatching the first bunch of episodes as we go along. We'll do some podcasts later about we'll go not episode by episode, but we're gonna do some chunks. We're gonna knock this out in chunks for sure.
Yeah, just like really break it down, talk about why it works, like how it affected us. I mean, obviously I've been watching it for over 30 years now, it seems. So, I've rewatched it, reread it. There are a lot of things, and it's as a writer, it's informed a lot of how I view writing too, which is great.
Quick note for you here. So I'm rewatching the early episodes, and this is right when spoiler alert, obviously, if you haven't watched Dragon Ball, but Goku gets killed by Raditz, Piccolo, and we're not even going like in deep right now, but I'm just talking about like arcs in general. Like I realized, I wish I had one arc of more of the Z Warriors before Goku got in it with Raditz, like more Chaosu, Tien, Krillin, them training together, fighting together.
Right.
Maybe because in the martial arts tournament, they were doing stuff, but it wasn't like, a battle together against a bad guy.
Against a bigger foe.
That doesn't really happen until Nappa comes, and Goku's really not even a part of that until the end. So I was watching it the other day. I was like, you know what? I really kind of wish they did one more mini arc before they got to Raditz, where they had maybe just another Earth threat, similar to like a Red Ribbon Army kind of thing from Dragon Ball, original Dragon Ball, but that included basically all the Z Warriors, before, this Saiyan saga starts. Because once Saiyan saga starts, it's kind of rough for our Z Fighter guys,
Totally. That's an interesting idea, too. And I think that's one of the reasons that the threat of Nappa and Vegeta seemed so important, is that it was the first time that they had all united against a common threat.
Yeah.
And the biggest heavy Goku wasn't even there. I mean, he's like running like as fast as he can or flying across Snake Way to get there. But yeah, I mean it that's one of the things I love about the original 296 cut is some of the filler is like, at least for my childhood, it's super cool. Like Yamcha, Tien Chaozu training on Kami's lookout. They go back in time and get murdered by Saiyans. And then Kami's like, all right, well, the ones that are coming are 10 times stronger than that. And you're like, no.
Yeah.
So
All right.
yeah.
I'm gonna cut you off right there, Dan, because this is actually great territory for our next episode. We will go a little deeper in the first 16 episodes.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
But that's a great place to start. So just so you know, that's a little taste of future episodes to come. So we talked a little bit about the Saiyan saga, talked a little bit about the Namek saga. Let's talk about the Cell and Buu sagas. What's your overall opinions on those?
Well, so I love. So there was a fan rumor forever that Toriyama wanted to end it at Frieza, and I
Right.
feel like that is alluding to a feeling in the community that everything that came after felt a little bit less important, and it became more about like how many more transformations people could have. I personally enjoy the Cell saga a lot. Like
Right.
I love it. I feel like the Android saga it came out in 91 in the manga, right around the time that Terminator 2 came out, and and there's a character from the future who mysteriously has a John Connor haircut. So, I mean, it felt like there wasn't a whole lot of ideas, kind of gelling at that time. But once it came around to Cell, I feel like Cell, one of the great arcs. There's a lot of stuff I love about Buu, but man, if I'm being honest, watching Buu, especially in the original cut, it is a slog. It is so long.
Yeah.
There are so many just episodes of Goten and Trunks like, I gotta pee, and like going to an island and figuring out where they gotta pee. It is long. It is so
I mean, we will try to cover Trunks, but we will definitely, I'll let you know. We'll let you know when we do these episodes. Like, hey, this is filler. There's some things that get from this filler episodes.
Right.
There are some episodes that you might want to say, you know what, you can just kind of skip this whole. There's really not much to talk about in a couple of them, but
totally.
Well, that's definitely down the road in the Buu and the Cell saga. When we do get into this a little deeper in the Saiyan and the Namek saga, that's going to be a little more in depth, I feel, overall. But yeah, what did you think about all the Super Saiyan? You said the Saiyan transformations were a little bit like, trying to just power up. But what did you think when Goku became Super Saiyan 2, Super Saiyan 3, or was that like was that cool to you at all, or was Super Saiyan 2 like, his hair is just a little bit longer?
It was cool when I was a kid because I mean, seeing Super Saiyan 3, you would see it on shirts and you'd be like, oh, they're and Dragon Ball GT Final Bout, the Super Saiyan 4.
Right.
And so you're like, oh, there are more levels to this. As an adult now, it kind of feels like there are too many transformations almost.
Right.
It's like
No.
Super Saiyan 3, Super Saiyan 4, Super Saiyan God, Super Saiyan God, Super Saiyan, Ultra Instinct, Ultra Ego, all this stuff. I mean, which those things are great. Those things are fun. But yeah, my personal favorite parts of Dragon Ball, I would say, are like from the beginning of Dragon Ball, or when he starts training with Master Roshi, all the way through the end of Namek. Like, I feel like there is a consistent powering up through those to meet higher and higher foes. And then once it gets into Transformationville, it just gets all kinds of crazy, which does create a lot of funny arguments in the community about power scaling and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a great point you made there too, though, because from Dragon Ball up till the Frieza saga, end of the Frieza saga, there is, every one of his, Goku's transformations, or his growth, or Piccolo's growth, or Gohan's growth, or all of the growth from their main characters, whether it's physically, mentally, or learning new attacks as well. All those do seem like they're warranted. Like they were all well deserved. They had to go through training. That was a couple episodes here or there. It was a longer period of time. That made it a lot more interesting to watch.
Yes.
I mean, I did enjoy the Cell saga when Gohan comes out of the
hyperbolic time chamber,
yeah.
or the Room of Spirit and Time.
Room of Spirit and Time. We'll go with the Japanese version of that.
Sure.
And like, oh shit, Gohan walks out the door. And he's a Super Saiyan,
Yeah.
And you're like, I was like, that's cool. And like, I guess that was a good way to kind of say, hey, we got to get somewhere quick as
Right.
far as power scaling, but we just don't have the time. And that I guess is a good way to jump through a little bit here and there.
I like
too,
the really quick if I can touch. I
Yeah.
like the narrative mechanic where it's almost Toriyama seems a little self-conscious of the transformation thing because he makes Trunks and Vegeta this like the super Trunks, super Vegeta where they're bulky.
Ascended Saiyans is what they called it.
Oh,
right?
okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they're ascended, but it hinders them. They're unable to defeat even though they're more powerful than Cell, they're useless because they're slower.
Right.
That they can't actually functionally use all of their power. So they add this little mystery to it where it's like Goku's like, well, let's just stay Super Saiyan all the time, and let's see what happens.
Right.
Let's not power up and down. Let's take. I think the line, at least in English, I don't know if it's in Japanese too, is let's take the long road to get the quick result or something. It's like the longer we take, the quicker the result we'll get.
Right.
Versus, Vegeta and Trunks just going in there and just hammering it out. More power, more power, more power. I do like the theme of, no, that's not the way. That's not how you get stronger. It's like you have to kind of relax into this state and then see what comes from there.
Okay. And speaking of, Vegeta, Trunks, Goku, like do you have a favorite Dragon Ball Z character? Because there's got to be, at this point, Dragon Ball Z, Super, there's got to be like 100+ great characters. I mean, that's one thing I love about Dragon Ball, by the way, that I don't know if I have a favorite. I really don't.
Really?
Mine changes. It was Goku at first, and then when Gohan was training Piccolo, I really, started loving Piccolo. He was one of my favorites. And then Gohan, he was kind of growing to like Gohan, but I was also a fan of like Yamcha back from Dragon Ball because he was kind of the comic relief. Funny.
Yeah.
And Tien and Chaozu, I feel like I wanted to see more of their backstory. I mean, I know it's there with the crane,
Right.
they're training back in Dragon Ball, but I wish there was a little bit more there to be had too. But I kind of like all the characters. Vegeta, I mean, he's an iconic character.
Yeah, totally.
One of my favorites.
I feel like he's always the most popular character, at least in the West. People love the bad guy who becomes the good guy. I feel like people can relate to that more. Like it's harder to relate to somebody pure that, just wants to fight stronger people and stuff like that. But people kind of see themselves. I feel like I've said this for years. People have a Vegeta complex where people feel like I should be the best at something, but I'm not. And that eventually that's what Vegeta became. Like, I'm supposed to be this, but I'm not. And I feel like that's kind of a feeling that people have, versus I don't know if there's much to relate to with Goku. He's just like a fun hero that we can project ourselves onto. It's like, oh yeah, this guy is awesome.
He's an easy template to like kind of attach to. Goku is for sure. But
totally. When people would ask, because everybody in my life was a Vegeta fan, and I wasn't, I mean, I didn't not like Vegeta, but he wasn't my favorite character. And when people would say, well, like Vegeta never gets his due, why can't he catch up with Goku? He's the prince of all Saiyans. Why doesn't he do it? And I think it's encapsulated in one line when he and Goku are first about to fight, where Vegeta says to Goku, paraphrasing, like, look, Saiyans, they measure our powers at birth. And like, I was the most powerful. I was a super elite. And you're just trash. That's why you came to this planet with like weak people. So there's no way you can defeat me. And Goku has a line where he's like, well, on Earth, I learned that even trash can defeat an elite if they try hard enough.
Right.
And to me, through the whole series, especially when the rivalry really starts, when Vegeta's like, why am I not the strongest? Why am I not the strongest? He is so obsessed with being the strongest. If you think about it, that's what all of his training is about. It's about pride. It's about ego, which I guess makes sense. The Saiyan pride and ultra ego and stuff like that. But Goku trains because he just loves to fucking train. Yeah. Like he just loves it. There's nothing else he would rather do. He doesn't want to spend time with his family.
Worst dad ever. Probably, for sure, in this series. We'll talk about that actually in the next episode where we do talk about the first couple episodes of Dragon Ball.
Yeah.
Because Dragon Ball Z, because that's actually a great place to start when that comes. But yeah, we'll talk about that for a little bit.
But I think that's the theme that I love most about Dragon Ball Z is that if you try hard enough, you can beat somebody more talented than you.
Yeah.
And that's something, I mean, I was never a talented athlete or martial artist, even though I've been a lifelong martial artist, obsessed with it. And that was always my motto in my head. It's like if you work hard enough, you can beat somebody who's more talented than you. Sort of like Rock Lee in that regard. If
Right.
we're talking Naruto, Rock Lee is a character who can't use ninjutsu, so he just has to train physically to keep up with the ninjas. And he's one of the most beloved characters for that reason. He's just struggling against his deficiencies.
Yeah, I think that's in general why Dragon Ball Z and Dragon Ball is such a popular series just
Mm.
worldwide is because of that. It's so inspirational to a lot of people.
Yeah.
It's just like, hey, whichever character, there's someone that you can latch on to, connect to, and let it inspire you to work to be better person or better. Whether it's well, Gohan, they didn't really worry about studies, but training to get better. Stronger, better. And if you work hard and put your time in and go through it fight, you will eventually reach your goals.
Right.
It's not dissimilar from a Rocky story. It's very
Yeah, push yourself beyond your limits. I mean, like there's great filler stuff where you see Goku training in the gravity ship and he's
Mhm.
just like can't move and he's like I need to take a break and then he's like nope, not taking a break.
Yeah.
My friend and my son, their lives are at stake. I
Yeah.
didn't mean for that to rhyme, but it
Well,
did.
yeah. I mean, heck, that's what inspired me to start training. I mean, that for weight training, that's like I was like,
So
wait.
many people.
I was like,
It's a it's a
serious.
cliche. Martial arts,
Yeah.
weightlifting, like
Everyone at the gym, everyone,
yeah.
they've got these shirts on. They got the Dragon Ball. They're repping it now. Everyone, no, people are proud of it, and it's for good reason. It reminds them that they look down and they see that and they say, okay, I can always do one more rep, one more
Right.
set, or train
You
harder.
feel it. If you wear a rash guard that's like Vegeta's Saiyan armor, you're
Yeah.
like, yeah, like I can push out that extra rep. I can do all that stuff. I saw a meme, I don't know if you saw it recently, where it was a picture, it was that quintessential picture of Toriyama turning around and smiling to the camera. And it said, this man has been more responsible for people going to the gym and improving their lives than any self-help program ever made.
Yeah.
And I agree with that. I think that there are also a lot of people that would be the opposite. They just enjoy it to enjoy it and stuff like that. Like, the nerdy side of the Nerdy Jock podcast.
Right.
But it is a cliche. I see every time I'm in a gym, I see at least one person with Dragon Ball shit on.
Yeah.
Or, like if not more. I mean, people, it inspires them.
All the time now, all the time. But yeah, that's pretty much sums up like why I love Dragon Ball Z, and
Yeah.
I'm super too. And speaking of, we're what 35 minutes in this pod, but we still have so much more to go and cover here. No, I know you're not like caught up to date on Super, but
Yeah, I
what
need to get on that.
have you watched any of the first arcs at all, or
Yeah. Oh well, I've watched all of Super.
oh you watched it all? Okay,
Everything in the that was animated, I watched.
okay,
And I also read the manga because I heard it was different.
yeah,
So there were some differences. So I'm caught up as to the end of the Tournament of Power.
okay. That's
Haven't done Moro Granola, all that
right.
stuff that everyone's done. I haven't seen Ultra Ego,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, that's what I was just wanted to talk to you about that real quick here because speaking of Dragon Ball, we've pretty much covered all the sagas. We didn't really go deep into Cell or
well,
Boo.
I have a question. You asked me what I thought
Right.
about Cell and Boo. What did you think about those?
I really liked them actually a lot.
Cool.
I liked the Boo saga to where as far as a character, Majin Buu was never really. He's probably my least favorite of the characters because he doesn't really talk. Doesn't have much
Right.
personality. Like I think
He's not malicious either. Like
Yeah.
he doesn't have like a goal to destroy the world.
right.
Yeah.
And when he does power up, when he absorbs the other fighters, it's not really him. It's just like him using the others' powers. So I mean, actually, Cell did that a lot of that himself with the androids.
True.
Before he became
But that was
ultimate
baked
version
in.
of
That was baked into who he was.
Right.
He had to take them. So.
But with the Boo saga, it was like, for me, I really enjoyed a lot of it because it was, and you can actually tell. I mean, as far as action and in mixing comedy and action, because original Dragon Ball was a lot more, gag jokes, a lot more comedic, a lot more lighthearted.
Right.
And even though, you get to the Saiyan saga, Vegeta saga, that starts to go pretty hard. Namek saga is where it's really no jokes about. It's pretty serious there for the most part.
Like children are being murdered.
Yeah, it gets pretty brutal. You're like, oh wow, this Frieza guy is crazy. This stuff's going down. So it does take a more serious tone there. And then Cell Saga kind of like I feel like it from a it kind of one-ups that as well, and it just keeps, you know, let's go, let's go, let's go. And the Boo Saga, that's when they have every character in there. They have Mr. Satan and Pan and Videl and Gohan, and they're, you know,
They brought back comedy
it
elements.
brought a lot
Yeah.
more comedy elements that I actually really enjoy about Super. Is what I
Yeah.
was going to mention. That's kind of a little segue there. That Super is pretty enjoyable to me because it does look like it's like, hey, we'll take the best elements of Dragon Ball Z, the action stuff,
Mhm.
stuff like the choreography, and we're going to also take the best stuff that you could tell, you know, Toriyama and the guys loved about original Dragon Ball.
Right.
And so some people, you know, I have heard people like, oh, I'm not a huge fan of Super. It's a little bit, you know, hokey or jokey or just too, you know, not
Right.
really serious. I'm like, well, I was like, if you you know, didn't watch just Z and you watched Dragon Ball and you read the Dragon Ball manga, it's a lot more like Dragon Ball than actually, you know, Dragon Ball Z kind of. I feel like Dragon Ball Z in a way got away from a lot of that with all the fights and stuff, which I do love. Which we will get
Mm.
into action sequences and fight stuff
I think
later as well.
too
But
that like a lot of localizations around the world really made they emphasize the action, especially in
right,
America, with the Falconer score and the scripts that they because for some reason Toei wouldn't share the Japanese scripts with Funimation.
right,
So they had to try to localize it off of Spanish scripts from Latin America and then just approximate what they should be saying, which kind of
Mhm.
and around the time this is a time during like the Monday Night Wars, like WCW versus WWF at the time, now
Mhm.
WWE. And so the show kind of became I mean, I remember when Funimation started releasing movies too, they would put like Disturbed and Deftones
Mhm.
songs in them. Like it was like the new metal era, you know? So it was
Right.
like, it was edgy, it was hard. This is serious shit, nothing funny about this, you know? But even if you watch Z in Japanese,
True.
like there's a lot of gags in it.
There are.
Not as much as Super, but I agree with you. I appreciate the lighthearted element of
Right.
Super. I like that it has that.
Yeah, I mean, and and Super does still have some, you know, amazing fights, and I do like, as far as power scaling and trying to switch it up from the super. You know, you can only go Super Saiyan so many times, you know, 3 or 4 or
Yeah.
whatever, you know, infinity, and I
No
do.
one's learned any new techniques.
Yeah,
It's
that's kind of something I miss too. I like the new techniques. I like them, you know, learning moves besides. Oh, we're just gonna do a Super Kamehameha or a
right.
Genki Dama, you know, something like that,
Or
or the
even like
Senko beam, you know.
even like Yamcha who gets shit on, like in the Tenkaichi Budokai arc, when he busts out the Sokidan or the spirit ball in English, the thing that he can
And he
control.
does this.
Yeah, he controls it and jerks it all around. Like that's an awesome
Pretty cool.
technique. Yeah.
I mean, Goku kind of uses a little bit of that in actually against his fight with Raditz. He does a Kamehameha,
And then yeah, he rips it up.
and
Yeah.
he kind of holds the energy, and then it kind of it follows Raditz, which is really which we'll get into in the next episode. But
Right,
that's
right,
pretty
right.
cool too. I don't want to jump the gun here on that, but yeah, but the Boo Saga was a lot of fun too. I really did enjoy it. I definitely think you could cut out quite a bit of the filler episodes.
Hmm.
But overall, it's
Which if you watch Kai, like if you're inclined, you want to watch Boo and you want it a little bit more truncated, you can just watch
right.
Kai and especially if you like English too. I feel like the Funimation guys did a really good job on the dub on Kai. Like it's
Yeah.
solid.
So I have to admit, I actually have not seen Kai.
Okay, it's
So
on
that's
Hulu.
yeah, it's on Hulu, it's on Crunchyroll as well. I do have Crunchyroll, so that's gonna
Mm,
be it's on my agenda next, but I am still watching, you know, the original full series just to go through this so we can talk about some of those early filler episodes too.
sure. I've been also leaning like this. I hope I'm not leaning out of frame.
No, no, you're fine. No, I mean, we'll figure it out, whatever.
It's okay. If I've been out of frame half the time, you know, this is gonna look better as we go.
Yeah, this is episode 1, literally
Yeah.
101. So just gonna have a good time here, and we're really excited to get going.
If you watch Kai, watch it dubbed, I would say, because you
Right.
will watch the subbed in Japanese anyway. That will always be
Right.
there, and that to me is the preferred way to watch it. The Japanese cast, they're much older when they do Kai, so I
Mm.
feel like they can't give it as much energy as they could when they were younger. No disrespect to them. I mean, Masako Nozawa, I believe, is 90 years old now.
Wow.
The lady who plays Krillin, who also plays Luffy, I mean, she's in her 80s. I mean, like they've been doing it since the 80s. So
Yeah.
they're up there. But what I love about the Kai dub is that they use the Japanese scripts, the terms. Destructo Disc is Kienzan. You get to hear Chris Sabat say Makanko Sapo for the special beam cannon. And Sean Schemmel like insisted that for the speech when he gives the Frieza that he uses the phrase "I am the Super Saiyan Son Goku," And so it's like the closest. I mean, it's great. Like it was them. They had been doing it for 20 years already, I think, and they knew what it was, and they had really become better actors by that point. So it's just as an experience, I feel like check out the Funimation dub of Kai if you watch Kai.
Okay, that's a great place to start then too. I think I'll do that as well. Oh gosh, anything else you want to get into this initial podcast?
Yeah. So I mean, we talked about what inspired us to watch
Right.
Dragon Ball and how Dragon Ball inspired us to do things, or at least you did.
Right.
I'm a lifelong martial arts nerd,
Yeah.
so Dragon Ball was right up my alley. All that stuff from the 90s, like Ranma One Half and Dragon Ball that was martial arts themed, I loved it. But I think it'd be interesting to talk about what inspired Toriyama to make Dragon Ball.
Right. Yeah, that's a great segue too. So tell me a little bit more. You are kind of our Dragon Wiki is Dan. DK is the Dragon Ball Wiki
Yeah.
in a way. So he has tons of amazing facts, really great knowledge, and you're gonna want to listen to this part too.
So Toriyama, I don't remember what job he was doing, which is a great way to start a history. I don't remember the beginning. I think he was doing a graphical design job, and he saw an ad in a magazine to become a manga artist, and it was for a contest. And you could either do an action one shot or you could do a gag one shot. And he saw that the requirement for the action was 22 pages, and the requirement for the gag was 15. And because Toriyama was like, well, I'm lazy, so he wrote a Star Wars parody and he submitted it. And it didn't win. It didn't win. But an editor found it and looked at it. And what he thought was amazing about it was one of the cleanest submissions he had ever seen. There weren't a lot of erase lines. I mean, because Toriyama doesn't do breakdown sketches. He just perfectly renders the picture. Like just first go. And he also does such good perspective with his weird rounded shapes and stuff that the guy was like, this guy has some promise. So worked with him, developed him for a little bit. And then he created a hit manga series, a gag series called Dr. Slump.
Right. Which, if you are a Dragon Ball fan, you've probably seen some crossover there actually a little bit too.
Yeah,
right?
during the Red Ribbon Army arc, he goes to, I think, I've never seen Dr. Slump. I think it's Penguin Island.
Right.
Meets Arare and all the different people and meets Dr. Slump and stuff like that while he's fighting, I think, General Blue.
That's correct.
The blonde-haired guy. Yeah. So wildly successful series, like hugely popular. But Toriyama doesn't want to do it anymore. Why? Going back to the lazy thing, it's really hard to write jokes like week after week. And manga artists, I think, are some of the best storytellers in the world because they have to write and draw new stories every single week forever.
All the time.
My favorite manga of all time is Hajime no Ippo. I believe it's been going since 1986, which with very little time off, George Morikawa, I hope I'm remembering his name correctly now that I'm under the gun. He has been drawing 22 pages of that thing for the better part of 37 years, which is insane. I mean, and we're now in an era where we're seeing monoliths of manga die before series finish, like Berserk. It happened. Togashi, the creator of Yu Yu Hakusho and Hunter x Hunter, he has health problems, so Hunter x Hunter has to go on a lot of hiatus. What's the plural of hiatus?
Hiatuses?
Hiatuses. Yeah, he has to take a lot of breaks. So anyway, going back to Toriyama, so he wants to get out of the Dr. Slump game because he's tired of writing gags, but he doesn't know what he wants to do. And Shonen Jump, it's like one of their biggest things. So they're like, well, we don't want this to end, like because this is popular. But eventually they see how miserable he is, and they're like, okay, if you develop one other thing that we see has potential, we'll let you end it. I believe, as the legend goes, he worked for a year trying to develop something new and just couldn't do it. Just couldn't do it. Had to keep writing gags, was suffering immensely, under the weight of his success. And finally...
What a terrible problem to have.
I know, right? And then finally, there was this moment where his wife tells his editor, my husband is very unusual for a manga artist. And the editor, well, what do you mean? She said, well, most manga artists, they listen to music when they draw and they focus on their hand. But my husband, he always just watches the same movie over and over again. He'll look up at key scenes to watch and then go back to drawing. The editor, well, what's the movie? And the movie was Drunken Master by Jackie Chan. And so the editor asked him, well, hey, why don't you do something with that? Why don't you do something kind of like that. So Toriyama develops a one-shot called Dragon Boy, which you can find on the internet. I don't encourage piracy. You can, find it however you want. Go to a bookstore. Or I don't even know if it's in print, but like you can find it for sure. Dragon Boy, and what you can see from it is it has the art style of Dragon Ball, but a much different character design for the main character. It looks more like a 1970s Jackie Chan, has the kind of like, I don't know, Chinese mullet of the time and stuff like that. And it does well. And so then from there, he develops Dragon Ball. He takes elements from the Chinese myth, Journey to the West, about the monkey god, gives the character the monkey god's name, which is Sun Wukong, which is in Japanese, Son Goku, and all that stuff. And then the rest is history.
History. We probably should have opened with that piece, but that was great. Actually,
Oh,
great.
yeah. No, it's okay. This is a tangential
Yeah,
podcast.
exactly.
Yeah, we're figuring it out.
That was fantastic. So if you want to check that out, you could probably find Dragon Boy online somewhere. I do not know. This is the first time I've even heard of this, so this is pretty impressive. So I'm
Yeah.
gonna check that out as well, just to see if I can at least see some, early artwork, or what it was, how it was spawned, and became Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z. So
One thing before we wrap up,
Oh, yeah.
we're talking about things, just going back to things that we've already talked about, because you mentioned you weren't the biggest fan of Boo as a villain, not as exciting because he didn't have an agenda.
right.
He was kind of like weird and crazy, and he got his power from absorbing other people, and that Toriyama didn't like Vegeta. Are you aware that a lot of the villains that Toriyama created throughout Dragon Ball were based on his editors that he didn't like?
No,
Yeah.
what?
Yeah. Yeah, he went through a number of editors, and he didn't like being told what to do. I'm sure the editors weren't bad people, but I mean, you have to understand Dragon Ball is the hugest thing ever at this time.
Oh yeah.
It's a huge moneymaker, and so they need to do stuff with it. They need to make sure that all the trains are running on time and stuff like that. Toriyama has said in the past he's lazy, probably doesn't want to be under the gun like that, so he designed his villains based on his editor. So somewhere out there is an editor that Fat Boo was based on.
I mean, it had to be from somewhere, because that's the first time he's ever had a character like that. Besides, I mean,
Yeah.
like a Mr. Satan, which is just, he's a joke in and of himself. But
Right.
I was like, they're always, every character in Dragon Ball is, in shape or buff or working out or trying to get there, and you got this Fat Boo. Like, what the hell?
Right.
Who is this character?
In terms of like significant characters, sure. It's like Popo is fat.
Yeah, that's right. Mr. Popo is kind of fat, and then. God, there's a couple other ones, but yeah, I mean, and then some of the Namex, that just kind of chill out. The elder Namex got a little,
Yeah.
they don't work out so much anymore, but
They don't. I mean, they get fat from drinking water, those
Right.
Namekians.
that's gonna all come back to me like, hey, who else wasn't, what other characters weren't, in that kind of shape? But it doesn't really matter. All that matters is, it's a great series overall. And but I don't want people to think I don't like the Boo Saga. I really actually enjoy it. I love fusions, are one of my favorite things. I used to try as a kid to
Oh yeah,
perform fusions all the time.
it's
actually.
really hard. When we did the Dragon Ball Z music video on 3,
Yeah, actually, just use a second to give a shout out to 3 exclamation point.
yeah, that's okay. I know that we're 51 minutes in, but we should talk about how we met and all that stuff, and sort
Yeah.
of discovering how ubiquitous the fandom for Dragon Ball was. So Kevin and I met on a movie called Water for Elephants.
Right. We were back. I had just moved to LA. I think maybe a month and a half before. I just moved to LA.
I was like
for the first time.
2 or 3 months in.
Yeah.
And there's extras, there's background actors, as you know, in Hollywood, but we were a very interesting kind of extra on that. We were literally trained in circus labor.
Yeah, we were real roustabouts, trained professionally by circus.
We were paid to learn how to hammer stakes the proper way into the ground, and we had to physically actually pull up real circus beams unassisted by machinery.
Yeah.
There's a shot where Rob Pattinson, super nice guy, where he's just kind of stepping over as the roustabouts are like yanking up these giant things. That was real.
Mm-hmm.
That fucking sucked.
that was a tough day, but that was actually one of my favorite experiences on set. So just so you do know, I didn't really go into detail earlier, but I am an actor as well. I recur on General Hospital every now and then, so I'll let keep you guys posted if I'm doing something special there. But I do act, and that's what I came out to LA to do. This is my side hobby / love / passion right here.
Totally.
But and you start, if you want to get into SAG and become an actor, you kind of have to go through background or try to get your SAG card, maybe make a couple indie films. But I found it to be a little bit easier for me, at least, to just go through that.
We got lucky. I mean, I got 30 SAG vouchers as a
Yeah.
non-union person, being a core Benzini Rostabout.
Yeah, and that's how we met. I think we met, and I was doing that. And I loved it. I was like, dude, this is the best life ever. I get to come to set. And
Honestly,
just hang
my
out.
best experience doing extra work.
Right.
Like I mean, it was long, freezing cold nights.
Yeah.
Lots of hard work. I mean, I think we did like 20 takes on that, pulling those giant beams up thing. It was gnarly, and it was hot. It was the middle of the summer, but it was also like in the plains, so like the temperature just dropped at night.
Right.
It was crazy, but still one of my favorite experiences. Like, we had a really good group of people, but I remember we had a very varied group of people.
Right.
We had alpha males like Kevin here, and a dude whose name is actually Thor. Who,
Thor. Yeah.
He was like,
shout out to Thor.
Yeah, jacked Otto.
I think Thor was in Rebel Moon recently, just released on Netflix.
No
so,
way.
Yeah, maybe I'll contact Thor, and maybe he'll come on the podcast because he is a nerdy jock himself.
I know he loves fantasy novels.
He's a big fantasy guy. He loves to do D&D, play board games as well. So
that's awesome.
We'll have to try to get him on the pod for a future time. But
so yeah, a varied group of people. I remember one day we're all sitting and holding, which we were all sitting on like hay bales, and people were just talking about things that they like, TV shows. I don't even remember how it came up, because I remember there was a dude, Skylar, shout out to Skylar, who was reading a fantasy novel, and Thor came up and he's like, oh yeah, I've read that whole series. And then everyone was talking about sort of things that they liked. And I made some dumb flippant comment like, I learned everything I learned from life from Dragon Ball Z. And I thought that I was going to get clowned on. I thought, because that was like the nature. It was like a boys club. Everyone was making fun of each other all the time. But everybody got real, like, yeah, like everyone just nodded like, oh yeah. And then people were just talking about Dragon Ball and what it meant to them in their childhood. Yeah. And when I saw you do that too, that was the moment for me where I was like, oh, like it has become mainstream.
It's mainstream. we can get out of that anime closet now. It's 2024. It's mainstream. Yeah. It is. It's a growing market, guys. Anime is like, I think they said projected the next 5 to 10 years to be a $50 billion industry. Like maybe even like up to gaming and bigger than cinema. Everybody
watches it.
Yeah.
I mean, every 13 weeks, there's 200 new shows that come out in Japan. 200. Like it's insane. And I remember my current girlfriend, when we went on our first date, we're having a conversation, like she was talking about how she watches Demon Slayer.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking like, oh yeah, people just have the thing that they watch, because she's not, I wouldn't call her like a weeb or an otaku, but she loves Demon Slayer. Her sister just watched all of Chainsaw Man. I think that's her first anime. Her other sister is like now just gunning it through One Piece.
Right.
So, which actually is an interesting thing to say. Like, I think that maybe the most important thing about Dragon Ball Z is that it became the template by which all of the monolithic anime shonen properties that have come after it have been based on.
Yeah.
Naruto
for sure.
Naruto, One Piece, like to a Hunter to a degree, because before Dragon Ball, there were basically 3 types of shonen manga. There was gag manga, there was sports manga, and then there was like Fist of the North Star,
right?
Like super serious action,
Berserk level, that
yeah,
kind of...
or in mecha too, I should say. Like, there's a lot more. There's gonna be stuff that escapes me, but Dragon Ball was the first shonen manga ever that combined the growth element from sports manga, the martial arts element of like Fist of the North Star type stuff, and the gag stuff from gag manga.
Right.
It was the perfect Venn diagram point for all of that stuff. And it's been a formula that works. Yes. It's been a formula that has worked fantastically forever. You can still to this day, all of the stuff I'm reading Blue Lock, all the stuff, you can feel the shadow of Dragon Ball looming over it. It really set the stage.
Yeah, it's iconic, and that's why we're going to be doing that. Also, just another side note here, we're going to try to cover a lot more. We're talking about Demon Slayer, Hunter x Hunter, One Piece, One Punch Man, Chainsaw, Chainsaw Man.
Oh yeah.
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 We'll be doing more anime stuff than Dragon Ball Z, but Dragon Ball is going to be our focus for right now. But, you know, if we get, 10 episodes in and we've covered 100 episodes, maybe we might need to take a break from Dragon Ball. We're going to filter in some other cool stuff. You know, I'd love to do a Demon Slayer pod. I don't know if you're a huge fan or not, but I love Demon Slayer.
I've seen some of it, and
I'm
happy to catch up because it's definitely something that I appreciate. I love it. But I think we talked about too, Dragon Ball is the most appropriate place to start.
Great place to start.
It is the inception of all of these things.
And it's accessible to everyone.
Yes.
It's easy. You can jump on. You know, you can even, sometimes you can have it, I hate to say it, but you can even have it on the background if you're doing chores, doing stuff around the house.
One of my favorite things to do.
I suggest 100% focus, but if you have to put it on, do some homework, work on a project, do some laundry, just put some Dragon Ball Z in the background and get caught up with us because we're going to have a great ride here. So
Totally.
Yeah. Anything else we need to cover in this initial pod?
I think we got everything out. That seems like the most organic place to end it.
Yeah, I think that felt pretty good, and we're super excited to go on this journey with you guys.
Yeah.
So stay tuned. Remember to follow us on our socials and Nerdy Jock Media. Watch us. We're going to put this on YouTube as well. We're going to work on our setup as well. So you'll see this evolving just like Goku from a little boy up to Super Saiyan 1, 2, 3, and Ultra Instinct. Same thing with this show. We're going to keep pumping it out. Keep bringing you guys cool, new, insightful information, and hopefully, you'll have a great time enjoying the ride.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
All right.
Dude, fuck yeah.